I've once again restored the saved version of my trapblacks.ai file with all of its original colors here, found inside the 11 printing folder. And this time around, I'm going to show you how to output a full color document to a full color composite printer. Most likely a printer in your home or office. So this might be an inkjet device, it might be a color laser printer, it might be a color laser jet printer, that kind of thing. So I'll go ahead and press Control P, Command P on the Mac to bring up the print dialog box. And notice that my printer is once again set to my LaserJet 2700, which is not a PostScript printer, for what little that's worth in this case. However, it is a color composite printer, so it prints out full color pages, which are not of any use for commercial reproduction. However, they may be exactly what the doctor ordered. Let's say, for example, that instead of printing 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 copies of a document, as we routinely do when we're publishing my books, maybe I only want 100 copies of this document, in which case it might not make sense to commercially reproduce a document. If I've got a high-quality printer, such as this one right here, then it might make much more sense to just go ahead and print the document myself. Now, of course, I'll be responsible for my own trimming, so I'll have to cut these pages if that's something I'm interested in. However, I'm going to get better results. And that's the thing that I find that most people are unaware of. You don't necessarily get better results when you commercially reproduce the document. You get more expedient results, is the idea. But chances are very good that you're relying ultimately on halftone dots, which have a limited resolution associated with them, whereas even a consumer-level color printer is resolving at a much finer color screen and therefore is likely to give you extremely good results. So let's say that's what we're doing in this case. We're going to print out lots of copies of this entire document. I'm not going to print 100 though. Maybe there's going to be like a dozen people at this meeting, and I just want to make sure we have more than enough copies, so I'll go ahead and print 40 copies. So I can hand out my various media ideas as well, the skateboard, surfboard, t-shirt, all that jazz. I'll go ahead and switch to marks and bleeds, and I'll turn on all the printer marks, give it an offset of 24 points like so. In this way, I can get out a cutting board or something like that, and I can trim these pages myself, or I can hand it off to an assistant who's got an X-Acto knife, whatever. And then finally, I'll switch over to color management. And because I'm going to a local printer, my print profile, this is what typically amazes people. The printer profile is set to an RGB space. Now, why in the world would that be? There isn't such thing as an RGB printer. So RGB is all about projective color. So in other words, color coming out of your monitor, or color being projected onto a screen, or color being captured by a scanner or digital camera. That uses RGB as well. But when you're outputting to a white page, you are not using RGB. You are using some CMYK variant. But here's the problem. It's not CMYK either. It's some combination of inks that is unique to your specific output device. So what the various printer manufacturers have decided to do is to accept RGB input, and then the printer driver is in charge of converting those RGB colors to whatever inks that specific printer uses. Which is great, by the way. It's an excellent solution, with one problem in this case. The printer profile should not be spec'd as Adobe RGB. It should be spec'd as sRGB, followed by that string of letters and numbers, because virtually all consumer-level printers are designed to receive specifically sRGB input. And my guess is, and this is a test I want you to try with your printer, what I want you to do is go ahead and print this document or some other high-color document that you have sitting around. Go ahead and print it first with the printer profile set to Adobe RGB. And then go ahead and switch it to sRGB, print that document again, label that output so that you know which is which, because it's very important that you keep track of them here, and then compare them to each other and decide which is better. My guess is your sRGB output is going to look better. If it's the other way around, then go ahead and switch it back to Adobe RGB. You might also want to play with some of the other spaces. It's up to you, but color match can sometimes prove to be useful. ProPhoto RGB is a very wide gamut space. You're not going to want to use it for Illustrator. That's for 16-bit images inside of Photoshop. And then Apple RGB, unless you're using a Mac, I wouldn't touch that one. But most likely, sRGB is going to work out brilliantly for you. And then rendering intent becomes very important, because after all, you're running a CMYK to RGB conversion inside of Illustrator, and then Illustrator's handing off the RGB information, and the print driver is converting it back to whatever ink set it uses. So we're running a double conversion here, which is entirely acceptable, by the way. It's all in the name of getting good-looking colors, so if it requires a double conversion, so be it. But the nature of that conversion is very important. So in this case, if you've got a highly graphical file like we do, then you want to stick with relative colorimetric. If you've got a lot of photography going on, a lot of gradients, that kind of thing, then you might want to think about switching it to perceptual. Again, you might want to run this test on your local device. And because it is local and you've got the printer right there, and as long as you've got the supplies for it, you can run as many tests as you want. All right, so again, this is what I recommend. Go to color management, set the printer profile to sRGB, probably leave rendering intent to relative colorimetric, and then click the print button and see what kind of results you get. And what you're probably going to see is that your artwork brightens up and blossoms and looks more saturated, which may seem weird when we're going from a very saturated color space like Adobe RGB to a more drab color space like sRGB. So you might expect your colors to become more drab as well. But bear in mind what you're doing is you're saturating the colors to compensate for the fact that this is a low saturation space right here. So because of that compensation, you're going to get more saturated colors out of Adobe Illustrator.